Hey there! Want to spend less time pulling weeds? Check out Soil Shield by Modern Grower. It's the pre-cut landscape fabric solution to help you drastically reduce weed pressure. Just roll it out, staple it down, and plant. Then let it do the work for you. Say goodbye to endless weeding and hello to more free time. Plus, it's high quality, durable, and will last for years, saving you time and money in the long run. It's available in a variety of row and hole spacings to accommodate all the crops that vegetable farmers grow. Learn more about Soil Shield landscape fabric at shop.moderngrower.co or using the link below. One of the things that I know you've looked at in research at Cornell, making biochar out of other waste like cherry pits, vineyard prunings, things like that. I love the idea of that because that stuff's hard to deal with otherwise. Walnut hulls, macadamia nut shells, all those things, there's not a lot of other uses for them. And then I also know that you guys very recently, I think yesterday, you did a presentation on using dairy manure to make biochar. When you look at that type of biochar feedstock, a manure that could be composted or added to the soil straight, how would you advise somebody to think about, I have this pile of dairy manure here, I should make biochar out of it, or I should compost it and put that on my soil?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good and important discussion. And the important is again to ask the question, what do you try to fix? And if you have a nitrogen problem or you're substituting nitrogen fertilizer in your soil, then taking a high nitrogen containing feedstock such as dairy manure or other manures and pyrolyzing them is probably not the way you want to do that, because you're driving off half of the nitrogen as much as the carbon, and the other half of the nitrogen is transformed into the same kind of persistent organic structure that also the carbon is in, and essentially you're withdrawing nitrogen from the equation. However, in that scenario, two things could potentially sway your mind. One is you have a contamination issue. So maybe it's not dairy manure, but you're talking about human feces that are contaminated with hormones and antibiotics and pathogens. Then maybe you are swayed to say, okay, I accept that I lose my nitrogen, but I'm making something that's actually an environmental burden because it would destroy my water reserves, and I'm not allowed to put it on the soil to begin with. I'm putting my human feces and pyrolyze those. The other one is that, let's say you have dairy manure and it's benign, you can compost it, it is healthy and clean, and afterwards, and you have the space to do that and the time to do that. That's another, composting takes several weeks to several months and needs a lot of footprint that might not always be there, whereas pyrolysis you can pyrolyze within minutes, and therefore the throughput is a lot faster. But say you have all that at your disposal, then the question is, what are your transportation distances? Is that material then used on your farm? Then probably this is the best way of doing that. Or is that material you needs to be transported 100 miles or 200 miles or across the world? Then I would say it's probably not a good idea to ship 80% or 70% water across the landscape, because we know that, for instance, dairy lagoon manure the nutrient values in that can only be shipped about 10 to 20 miles until the nutrient value is lower than the transportation costs. So that's of course different for compost, but you cannot ship dairy manure, liquid dairy manure, very far to not have the transportation costs exceed the nutrient values. So that is in there as well. And the third aspect is, let's assume you are the consumer of your compost and you're in California and you're on an organic farm and you're making as much compost as is needed for your organic irrigated farm to keep organic matter levels up so that you only need the minimum water content for your irrigation. But that probably means that you are adding quite a bit of compost because the compost is mineralizing very fast. And so you're probably over applying nitrogen and phosphorus and everything just to keep organic matter levels up so that your irrigation is optimized. So maybe you don't need as much compost on your soil just to add for the nutrient the nitrogen need. So what about making as much compost to satisfy your nitrogen needs, but pyrolyzing the rest of your manure to satisfy your carbon needs to optimize irrigation? So here are 3 examples where in certain cases, for different reasons, you might be swayed actually to contemplate making biochar out of your nitrogen-rich feces, at least partially, instead of composting them. So the decision criteria are always different and need to take these local conditions in mind.
Yeah, I think those are great ways for people to think about it. It's almost like a flow chart, go down that. But one thing that's came up a lot is lately I've talked to people about horse manure and a lot of other manures. You're finding aminopyrrolid, persistent herbicide contamination in those manures. It's got a long half-life. Composting doesn't break it down. So composting isn't an option. Do you know if you pyrolyzed a tainted manure that had persistent herbicide present, will that herbicide break down in the pyrolysis process so the biochar that comes out the back end won't have that negative effect of the chemical in it?
Very clear, yes, if it is an organic compound. If we're talking about copper and cadmium and heavy metal or arsenic, then the discussion is more nuanced because of cadmium in is cadmium out. We could then talk about the form of cadmium or the form of arsenic. But if we're talking about glyphosate or any organic compounds, they are all denatured. They're another carbon compound and of no concern. And the same applies to pathogens as well.
In pharmaceuticals as well?
Yes, although I'm not, if they are organic, if the functional and the problematic active compounds and groups in these chemicals are of organic nature. Again, no cadmium or any heavy metals are still heavy metals.
Hello, growers. Looking to turn your homestead into a profitable business? Or are you a farmer looking to boost your sales? Check out my book, Sell Everything You Grow. This book is the ultimate guide to choosing the right farm business model that fits your farm, time, and location. Discover which model has the highest profit margins and why diversification is so important. Whether you're selling apples, vegetables, or microgreens, Sell Everything You Grow will help you find your first market or expand into new ones. Get Sell Everything You Grow on Amazon and start selling more today.